Hi, Jean.
Hi there. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
I'm pretty good.
Good. Thank you for taking the time to do this, Jean.
Oh, it's okay. I don't mind helping anywhere, any way I can. I don't have some of the depth of experience that like Walter has, but I'm glad to put in my 2 cents worth. I mean, I
No,
had a
you.
great experience, but it's not real generalizable, I don't think. But anyway, I'm very grateful for it and for what Walden is doing to encourage more engagement. So how's Walter in his new position? I see you on LinkedIn all the time.
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well too. So
Good. And Nadia, how are you, ma'am?
I'm doing well for sure. Yes, I see you on LinkedIn as well. How's the job? Enjoying
Good.
it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good. I more see your pictures of your home and the canal and everything else, but yes.
We got Dr. Francis over there. Go ahead, Dr. Francis.
Hi, everyone. Good to see y'all.
I know it's been a while.
I know.
Yes.
How's the weather treating you in sunny Florida?
Well, you see my
You got your
hair.
tan.
I am 10 shades darker.
Yeah.
I was caramel when I moved here. Now I'm bronze.
That's funny.
Well, spring has arrived here in Maryland, so it's starting to warm up a bit. It was a little chillier today, but I'm like, come on, summer, come on.
It was 93 degrees yesterday. I was going to get on the motorcycle, but it was too hot.
Oh yeah.
It's too hot. There's a barometer of, okay.
Well, look, people, when it's 70 degrees, people have on muckalups and sweaters and coats and fur hats. 70 degrees, and I'm walking around in shorts and a tank top, and they're like, where are you going?
That's funny.
Yeah, we have a nice day here in the mountains of Western North Carolina too, for a change. We've had some really hard freezing nights lately, which the apple growers hate after
Oh, yeah.
everything bloom. But today has been beautiful. So
Yeah.
hopefully spring will stay here consistently and we're through with our below zero temperatures for a while. So
No
that's
doubt.
unusual here. I grew up in Minnesota, so I'm with you, Walter, when everybody acts like it's freezing and the news telecast here,
Mhm.
report wind chills below 32 degrees. Unless it was the actual temperature was 32 below, we wouldn't get many wind chill warnings in Minnesota. So.
Yeah, I'm similar to you, Jean. I'm in Canada, so we're hovering at 1 degree Celsius, and we are still freezing in the nights, but that's okay.
Yeah,
we'll get
yeah.
there.
Well, my Fulbright experience, I spent in Ottawa and Gatineau, and it's colder there than it was in Minnesota. I learned the hard way that way. So yeah.
Oh, no doubt, that humid cold.
Yeah, and the snow, they piled the snow up next to the apartment building where we were living, and it lasted forever. I think probably well into March. It just never really melted. So, but Ottawa, we loved Ottawa.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
loved it. It was a wonderful experience. Learned a lot about curling, I'll tell you that. So,
It's a quintessential town, very European-esque.
yeah.
So we'll get started in a couple minutes, just still waiting for some of the panel and board members and participants. And I'm doing a waiting room, so just slowly letting people in. We will, regardless of participants, just keep recording and we'll share this on our YouTube channel. So your voices, stories, and experiences will be heard and used as resources. So thank you again for taking the time.
Yeah. No problem.
Tom, are you still good to do the chat? If I'm okay, perfect. And then pop
Sure,
in
no
whenever.
problem. Mhm.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hi, Tom.
Hello, Crystal, Walter, and Jean, and Dr.
Yeah.
Gilbert, Dr. Dorley, so many friends across all the miles.
Absolutely. That's wonderful.
Thanks for everybody being here. This is fantastic.
Now, we just want to keep trying to reach out as many different ways as we can, you know, that, so even if just a few people look at it on YouTube, so much the better, you know, so.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have Jermaine here as well, and Ashgar is here. Yeah, this is great.
So we'll do this a little bit informally in that if you would like to speak based on the questions and what is that coalesces with your experiences, then by all means just take the floor. If you want to raise your hand using the raise hand option, we can monitor that as well. And what I'll do is I'll start with Jean, as she's the first on my list of speakers, and I'll usher you in the first question, which is for those of you that are considered Fulbrighters. Please share your experiences around your Fulbright. And then we'll move to the second question, which is for those of you that want to be Fulbrighters, what are your experiences, so on and so forth. So we'll keep it fairly easygoing and just sort of flowing.
Okay.
Oh, Ashgar has a problem with his video. You know what, Ashgar, that's okay.
That's okay. I'm seeing all of you.
Oh,
and I'm on the phone.
perfect.
No problem. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Yeah. That's with my camera. Problem is with my camera.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all humble. Getting everything to work virtually.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us. Today we are going to do our second series around the Fulbright Readiness Program. This is part of our approach to supporting the chapter members in applying for Fulbright programming, whether it be professional, scholarly, or graduate exchanges. Today we have before us members of our advisory board, who are speaking about their experiences, as well as members who are applying for potential exchanges, sharing their stories. And our hope is that today you'll get an understanding of some of the reasons for, or the purposes of, or the gains to which you would attain for applying to these. And if you're already on your way in your application process, maybe some quick tips or hints from the panel members around their experiences and what can help in terms of your application. Feel free to utilize the chat, as well as if you do have a question in a natural pause in the panel, you can unmute your mic and ask your question as well. We'll just do it very informally, just because it is mentoring. It's not supposed to be just forward facing. And so we want it to be as interactive as possible. But I will start out. And so for the first question, it's going to be sharing your experiences as a Fulbrighter. So those of you that have had Fulbright exchange experience and professional exchange experience, sharing who you are, where you went, what years that entailed, and then we'll just go through those of you that want to introduce yourselves that way, and we'll start with the panel with Jean Dorley.
Okay, well, welcome everyone, and thanks so much for your interest in the Fulbright program, regardless of what it is. I'm pleased to be able to share my experiences, because I guess I had wished that there was a group like this when I kind of decided that, well, I'm not sure, but I think I might apply. I was at the Western Carolina University in the mountains of North Carolina at the time, as a assistant professor, and wasn't really eligible for like a sabbatical because I hadn't been there long enough. but I thought, well, I'll worry about that later. So the way that I went about the application, because I really didn't know anyone who had applied, I was very fortunate to receive a Fulbright research chair position. So that's on the professional side. But I think my comments, I've thought through them, and I think they'll be equally relevant for those that are applying for a scholar program or a student researcher program. So I talked with the chair of the department and said, I think I might be interested. Is it all right if I go forward with the application? And he said, sure. So I did. And one of the things that I think made such a difference in my success, given my relative naivete in starting out the application, was to reach out, on the application process. It usually gives you at least one contact for the institution that you're applying to. And I made liberal use of that. And so reached out to them and clarified the job description that was actually posted for this research chair and what they were hoping to accomplish when they made the application. And then asked explicitly who would be some of the professors that I would be working with if I joined you for this year. And I forgot to say that the year was in Gatineau, Canada, at the University of Quebec. And so I received the name of two faculty members on the university faculty. My specialty is program and portfolio management, and also thinking style diversity. So I had done some research in that area and was interested in extending it in more of an international situation. And so I talked to them, got a better feel for them. I found them very, very helpful. So I would encourage you to reach out, ask questions. All they can say is we don't know, or no, or whatever, but you have nothing to lose by trying to clarify exactly what they are interested in and what the fit would be. And the thing that helped me a lot is I had academic experience, but I had actually of professional experience, and they were looking to work with someone that could communicate with the national capital in Ottawa and understand and help represent the university in looking at some of the business needs. So that impacted the way I filled out my application, and I was successful. My husband and I and 3 dogs and 2 cats spent the year living in Ottawa, and I commuted across the river to the University of Gatineau. The other thing I have to confess, and I did up front with them, was that I do not speak French, which is kind of crazy that I would apply there, but Ottawa is a truly bilingual city. It's just beautiful that way. And they said, no problem. Well, it was an interesting challenge, but I, with a lot of help, and some lessons late in the evening, I tried not to be the ugly American. And so it worked out great. My husband enjoyed it. And we just had a wonderful, wonderful time. So I'll stop there and just encourage you as the application process to reach out to anyone you can find, including those listed on the application, but anybody else, including us on this panel, who might be able to give you some explicit suggestions in terms of how to respond to certain questions that could increase your likelihood of success. So thanks very much for this opportunity, Nadia.
Thank you. I'll ask Doug if he could speak. He's next on my list, and then Walter, and then we'll move down.
Okay, great. Thank you. So a little bit about my background. So I've done 2 Fulbright specialist exchanges, and I'm on a waiting list right now for a scholar in the same country as the last exchange. The first one was in Mongolia, and I worked to design the back office for an online program for the University of Finance and Economics. That was kind of an interesting thing. They do not teach in English, so we had a little bit more of a language problem than just French, because Mongolian is currently in Cyrillic. So it's kind of you try and figure out the words from what you know of Russian, which in my case is limited. So that was interesting. My second was 2017. 2019, I was a specialist at the Vilnius University in Lithuania. Prior to going there, I had limited knowledge of the Baltics. I now have learned a lot more about it. I worked in developing an entrepreneurship program based on the Stanford Lean Launch model. And currently, I'm also on the waiting final decision on going back to that university to teach for an entire semester and conduct a Baltic-wide research program. What I would tell you in terms of applying, and just some tips and tricks, and it's a little bit counterintuitive, but you need to do this research. Find out how many awards that they have in different types of countries, because some don't have a lot of awards. I'll give you an example. I was asked if I was interested in the Netherlands. And so, yes, I work with Tilburg University, and I also work with Twente University on some teaching. So sure, I was interested. When I looked at the number of awards and the number of likely applicants, I said, realistically, I shouldn't spend my time here. So look for other places, like Mongolia was an interesting example. It's out of the way, but you get some fantastic experience you might not have thought of otherwise. Also, something to keep in mind is the approval process goes through a couple of flows. There's a domestic review, peer review that happens here. It's a little bit of a black box. So if you get rejected, don't feel bad, come back again. Try to figure out why you got rejected if you can. I did get rejected the first time around in Mongolia, and I was told it was because of the way I submitted the subject matter. So sometimes you get rejected on the peer review. Once you go into the local review, then it's a little more complex. And this is where your upfront research will help. If you are applying to an institution that has had numerous recent Fulbrighters, you're going to have a lower possibility of getting accepted unless you're in a real specific area. Like one of the professors I know is very experienced at placing people in German language. There's a specific set of universities in the three German-speaking countries. And if you know them, you know everybody and you know how to get people in. But for most of what we do in business and social sciences, it's a lot broader than that. So look for universities that haven't had a recent Fulbrighter, and you can kind of dig that out of the different parts of the website. So I would definitely recommend that you do that. And also, if you can learn a little bit about the embassy. And that really helped me a lot with Mongolia, because the ambassador at the time was from Colorado, where I live. So that helped immensely. The ambassador then changed because it's a tier 3 country where they don't have political ambassadors in the sense of campaign contribution type ambassadors. These are career diplomats, so they rotate in and out about every 3 years. And I was able to make a relationship and build a relationship, make contact and build a relationship with a new ambassador. So you start to learn these things, and if somebody has done that, I mean, it's invaluable just to kind of see behind the wall. So those are kind of the key things. Do look carefully at the subject matters that those particular countries are looking at, because that can get you just almost immediately denied at peer review in the US. So make sure that you're clearly in there. Sometimes you need to be a little creative. How I got into Mongolia, even though I did a program for a University of Finance and Economics, that was an education grant because they wanted something on education. And so you see, if you turn things a little bit, that's really, really important. For the interview portion, that's a little bit different for us as administrators and faculty than it is for you as a student. What I would say there is practice. Find somebody that knows a little bit about Fulbright and has been through the process and knows the types of questions they're going to ask you. Usually what they're looking for is adaptability, because remember, a lot of Fulbright is geared toward the 18 to 22 crowd. And there are all kinds of life skills, adaptability issues that they want to avoid the red flags of. Most of our students are much more mature. But the backside of that is, do you have any kind of issues that, such as family members that won't be trailing, that you'll be splitting your time between the US and there, those types of things. That is a lot of what they probe kind of indirectly in those interviews, in addition to your interest. So that's all I have. Hopefully that's helpful. And so we have later questions. I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Doug. That's very thoughtful, and those insider tips I think most will appreciate. Walter, when you're ready, and then also Ashgar's on deck.
Okay, yeah, sure. So thank you so much, Nadia, for having me. And I'm so happy to share information on my Fulbright experience. I took a different route. I actually went down the path of Fulbright specialist because I was a consultant for a number of years, 15 years or so, management consulting. So I wanted to move into that space and use a combination of my skills from the corporate side as well as in higher education. So the perfect opportunity came, and it was in Amman, Jordan, to work with the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research. And the role that I played, I was an advisor to the Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research in evaluating the hiring practices for university presidents and helping to design and develop an evaluative model for assessing performance, primarily for first-year university presidents, so that they could actually find tenureship, because they had an internal problem of keeping university presidents beyond 2 years. So I had the opportunity to interview and work closely with 11 university presidents, the board of directors. I worked very closely with the binational Fulbright office in Jordan, as well as the embassy. And as a part of the interview process, prior to going there, I actually had to interview with both the binational Fulbright office in Jordan as well as the embassy, because they really wanted to make sure that I had the skills and competencies to evaluate and develop algorithms and a performance metric-based model that would help inform their system. The outgrowth of that was me writing recommendations for the congressional academic mandate for hiring for the entire Kingdom of Jordan. So I credit all of my experience in higher education as well as consulting to that body of work. Some of the tips that I can offer is that you really, if you have the opportunity to work with the embassy, I think it's really good to do so, because they can help navigate the politics and the bureaucracy. For example, the system that I worked in Jordan was very complex, very bureaucratic. It's almost like the federal government in the United States, if you can envision that. So I really needed a partner or several partners to help me navigate that space in order to get the interviews that I needed, in order to gain access to the data, in order to meet with students, in order to work with the private sector, the partners that they had within each of the 11 institutions. I would have never been able to do that without the embassy. And I can tell you that was probably one of the best decisions that I made, to personally reach out to the embassy, because I've now gained long-standing relationships over time with them, and we've been in exchange. They've also invited me to come back to Jordan to do some follow-on work through my consulting practice. So that's one of the benefits as well. And when I say work with a binational Fulbright office, oftentimes they will have additional information that World of Learning does not have about future opportunities within the organization that you're working with, but additional organizations that might not be on the slate yet in the United States to even apply for Fulbrights. So it really gives you that extra edge or advantage if you are forward thinking and strategically planning when you're working in concert with both of those organizations as a strategic partner. The lessons learned for me, and I tell you, going through the interview process, one of the things that I was very blessed by is that I knew several Fulbrighters already. And I would sit down, have meetings with them, interview them to help me prepare for my interviews. But I would also I wanted to glean from their experiences, enter theater. I had lived in Turkey for 2 years. I was very familiar with the Middle East. When I was in the Air Force, I was temporary duty in Kuwait. I lived in the Philippines. So I had a lot of international experience in various countries that I could bring into the Fulbright experience. So one of the things I would offer is to become culturally competent in the area in which you're seeking a Fulbright assignment. That would be very helpful to help you acclimate, especially if you don't speak the language, if you don't have any ties to the country, and if you don't really know anything about the government or the governmental or parliament system in that particular country. It was the most life-changing experience of my life. And I tell you, groups like this is so very instrumental in sharing information because we know what the process is like, we know what the experience is like, but we also know what the outcome is on the other side of being a part of a global change initiative to bring your skills, your competencies to effect a system that desperately needs your help. So that's what it's really about. It's about collaborating with people like Jean and Doug and myself, who has definitely been a part of this process and journey to share. Because if you don't have anyone sharing with you, it's almost like you're out there by yourself. And this institution, and when I say institution, I'm talking about the Fulbright Association. I mean, it's huge. Even if you've not met any Fulbrighters, I guarantee you, if you reach out to any Fulbrighter and you tell them what your goals are, they will walk with you every step of the way.
Thank you, Walter. That's very thoughtful. And I think what's really important there is that intercultural awareness. One of the things that can help, and I'll just do a segue before Ashgar, is on the website. There is the Fulbrighter app, but there's also, you can go into the portal and talk to people from various chapters. So you can look up various chapters and members and connect with them. So what Walter and Doug and Jean have all said can be facilitated through the site. So please take time to navigate that and learn more about what it's offering. Thank you so much, all of you. Ashgar, when you're ready, would you like to
Yes,
contribute?
I'm ready.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks meeting with you. And my experience of Fulbright is twofold. One is my experience about the project that I did in Romania, and the other is my experience in serving as a member of the peer review committee for public administration in the past 8 years. So basically, my background, like Walter, was basically in major part on the consulting area. So it happened that in one of the OSPA meetings that we had, the two professors from the Romanian National School of Public Policy and Political Science, we got to know each other, and they insisted that I go there. And specifically, they asked me to do a couple of projects for them. So that's why we use the conduit of a specialist program. And I went to Romania. What I did there, basically, they asked me to design a course on comparative public policy and administration between EU and US for a senior students, because they were supposed to go to different countries in EU in order to further their studies. So that was one of the major parts of my assignment. The second assignment was to do a few workshops for the faculty for online courses. And at that time, they didn't use, for instance, neither Blackboard or the other platforms. So I basically designed a few courses for them in order, to use the online courses. It happened that at that time, I also attended a couple of dissertation committee as a visiting member, and also did talk to students and faculty about the public administration programs as well as public policy. And then I provided them with a kind of revised look at their public administration for at the bachelor's level as well. So basically, it was like a consulting service to them. So I'm not going to elaborate on that because both Doug, Walter, and Jane talked to you about that. I want to spend a few minutes about your application, or those who really forward an application for the specialist program, because this is what I have been doing in the past few years. One thing that is very, very important in the application, as Doug said, is you have to be very specific. We run into the applications that people talk a lot about 5, 6, 7 different areas. And when we want to make a conclusion that what would be the contribution of a specialist who go from US there and what they expect to learn from the other side, is a kind of tough job to do. So it's very important really that you focus on 1 or 2 areas that really you are interested in, you have some experience in, and you think that what you learn from the other countries and bring it to your institution will help. Also, I think Walter did talk a little bit about the cultural competency. This is very important. It doesn't mean that you have really to demonstrate that you are a cultural expert on everything. But the key point is that you show your awareness about the nuances of the culture when you are confronting other scholars, students, or partners. So that kind of awareness really puts you in an advantageous position in order to see that you are well aware about what you expect. So there are 4 or 5 other areas that you have to demonstrate your qualification. One is, of course, the expertise in the area. Like I said again, you have to focus on a specific area. I mean, very, very specific. For instance, it is not enough to say that I'm well-versed in public administration, I am well-versed in policy. If, for instance, you want to focus on that area, for instance, you may, for instance, state that your specific area of interest is program evaluation. That makes it more specific. So this is a key thing that you have to talk about. And the second thing is that normally some people, I'm not saying in all cases, they try to inflate a little bit their expertise. They come up with a long list of their publications and every single speech that they have done. Be selective. Try to focus on those areas that those who judge or make a decision about your qualification lead them exactly in the same route that you want to be. So these are a few tips that I have, and I will be glad if anybody wants more information about the selection process, especially of course, we are talking about the internal selection, as like Doug said.
Thanks, Ashgar. Your specificity
Sure.
is greatly appreciated. We'll move on to the next question. And Crystal, I'm going to put you on the spot here. So for Crystal, who is applying for an exchange, did you want to share a little bit about your process, your thinking, the resources you've used? I'm sure others are in the same position.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. I want to talk about, 2 things that come to mind. First, when Jean was talking about her experience, just speaking with her employer, I am pursuing the Fulbright Specialist Program. And let me tell you, that is the first piece of advice I received from a Fulbrighter. And let me tell you, it's very important because that will even let you know whether or not, when you should start exploring the process. So for me, I am a federal government employee, and it's very important that if you're trying to apply for any Fulbright specialist or scholar program, you need to understand, particularly if you're a federal government or local government or state government employee, what limitations there are around where you can go, number one, and what you can do. The interesting thing for me was my agency was supportive. However, they really couldn't afford to lose me for the scholar program for that length of time, which is why I said, well, let me explore the specialist program. So I want to just let people know, if you're going in, and you need to make changes, you have to determine whether or not you're willing to give up your job to do it, or if you can't, maybe you have to make a pivot in what you want to do to still get the experience, which is why I looked at the specialist, because it's a lower demand on time for me being away from my full-time job. And, the application process is very straightforward. I think the most important thing is to ensure that you're going to have the support from your leadership, because that is going to determine whether or not you can even go or not. If you have an employer that says, you may have to resign, do leave without pay, and primarily for people who are raising family, and if you're the breadwinner and maybe everyone's on your benefits for healthcare, how that plays in. Now, luckily for me, I don't have any children. I'm not married, so it was a really easy decision for me. COVID-19, of course, did impact my ability to finalize my process. However, I was still able to submit the application. But of course, for those who are planning for future projects, Fulbright is going to give insight to those individuals that applied on, when they're going to move forward with next steps. But I think the most valuable piece of advice that I received was having that conversation with my job and just being upfront about the expectations before you even think about applying. Now, for me, I was already like 30% into my application when the Fulbrighter said, hey, you should probably talk to your job. And I made the swap to the specialist program once I realized, okay, they're not going to let me leave for 6 or 9 months. Yeah.
Thanks, Crystal. Jean, you had your hand up. And Crystal, I think your advice is spot on for those that are considering either of the programs.
Yeah, I really related to what Crystal was saying, because as I mentioned before, the first thing I did is to discuss this with my department chair, because I was a rather new faculty member who was not tenured at the time and who was not eligible for a sabbatical. So I'll just share the details. I don't know how generalizable these will be, but I talked with him, and the compromise that we reached, if I were to be accepted for this research chair position, was that and at the time, I should say, I was directing the graduate program in project management and teaching in that program. So the compromise we reached is I taught a heavier load before I went. So I met my course obligations so I could be gone for 10 months. And I agreed to manage the program virtually. It was a virtual program long before COVID. It was an online program in North Carolina, open to anyone across the country, but primarily to students in North Carolina who didn't have easy access to a university. And so that's what I did. Not ideal, okay? And I wish I could have just forgotten about the university when I was in Canada. But I'm so glad I did it, because we managed virtually, it was, even if I was sitting in Cullowhee, North Carolina, where the university was located, I would be dealing with everybody coming into the program and reviewing programs virtually anyway. Very few students that were seeking admission would come to the university campus itself. So we worked it out, and I couldn't agree more that, you need the support. Of course, I needed the recommendation, Crystal. I don't know if you needed that recommendation as well. So to be totally upfront, clearly there's some benefits from the institution to the federal government or to the university. They made a big deal of this. But, so through a series of compromises and a whole lot of work, I was able to do that. And the other thing I just want to support in terms of what some of the other speakers have said, do reach out to the embassy. Make sure you understand what kind of work permits you're going to need. In my case, because I was just heading way north, I just wanted to make sure I knew what kind of paper. I had more paperwork for my pets than I did for my husband and myself. But we made it all through it. And there are a couple other benefits. It's a slog. I'm not going to pretend that application process it's an endurance test. And you have to be ready to receive feedback and adjust your procedures as you go along. And I hope, some of you listening tonight or to the recording, feel free to reach out and we can all give you the benefit of our slogging through it experience. But it is a slog. But on the other side of it, when I finished my Fulbright, I was invited back. One of the things the University of Quebec was not doing, even though they had all the software, was using it online. And so I was invited, all they did was use it as a repository for the students' syllabus and stuff like that. So I was experienced in teaching online. And so I started demonstrating some of that. And so I was invited back for the next 2 years to teach a hybrid courses on the weekend basis. I would go up there probably 4 times a term, and the rest of the time I would use their technology to stay connected with the students. So they had a living example of what was possible, and and I was paid for that. So that was one very good extension. As Walter says, you never know where these contacts will lead and what kind of opportunities they might have. Never did I believe that, teaching in a hybrid environment would be such an eye-opening experience for some of the faculty there. The other thing with the embassy, knowing the embassy, and they created the database, the Canadian embassy, they reached out to me not all that long ago to do a presentation, out of the clear blue, I heard from them, to their embassy staff on how they could use thinking style diversity, which is one of the areas I'm interested in, to improve their relationships with their clients in Ottawa. And so I had an opportunity to work with them, deliver that online kickoff for their professional development days, and develop some worksheets for them to use. So you just don't know where this is going to lead. And I would just encourage you to keep some of these opportunities that you've heard some of us talk about in mind as you go through this endurance test, and maybe try again, as several people have suggested, because it's really worth the effort and the journey and the learnings. I mean, I learned so much and was so appreciative of the different kind of international blend that we had in Canada compared to what I was familiar with in the United States. So I'll stop now, but the embassy is an important ally. I can't emphasize that enough. Do make sure you have the strongest possible support from your supervisor and figure out, what it'll take, what we can work out, so it's a scholar program rather than a specialist or whatever.
Thank you,
Crystal.
Jean. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jean. That's very great advice, and you're absolutely right around keeping going and being resilient through the process. Before you speak, Crystal, I just wanted to bring in the next question for people to ruminate on. So many of you have already talked about some key considerations as you're applying for the program. So either if you still haven't shared a key consideration, or we want to move to, if you knew then what you know now, what would you recommend for the applicants in the room, as well as when we share this on YouTube, what would that be? So Crystal, by all means, take the mic, and then we'll move through. We'll go to Doug, Walter, since Jean just shared, and then to Ashka. Thank you.
Yes, so I'll answer if I knew what I knew now, then what would I offer? So primarily, and I want to go back to the conversation about getting your employer on your side. One of the things that they were interested in is, if you go away, what how will that experience help you when you come back? And I think if you approach it from that angle, you'll get the support and they'll work with you. I know for me, for my job, I work in the international side of the house for the agency that I work at. And so any experience, I was going to be able to bring back something that I learned to apply it to my current career when I come back. So have the answers to that question. And even if your employer says no the first time, because I got to know the first time, but then I went back and I said, how can we make this a yes? And then that's when they started to open up more. And then I knew that if I pivoted to the specialist, they will be willing to work with me on that timeline. So don't let the no discourage you. And if you do get a no, go back to the drawing board and do some more digging to figure out how they can turn that no into a yes.
Yeah. Was it Doug next or me? Nadia?
It was Doug, but that's okay, Walter. Go right ahead
Okay.
and then Doug will follow.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the application process just a little bit. And you asked the question, you know, what would you do differently, or if you had known, you would have done it. One of the things I can share, and data supports this, is that if you are working with Fulbrighters that would write letters of recommendation for you, your chances are greater in terms of getting selected the very first time. When I went through the process, my mentor was a Fulbrighter and wrote a letter of recommendation. I was selected the first time. Over the past 10 months that I've been in my new role here in Miami, I've written 3 letters of recommendation, and all 3 have been selected the first time. So it works. The other thing I wanted to say, be deliberate and intentional about what it is that you want to gain from the holistic Fulbright experience. I think oftentimes our mind is really targeted on the task at hand, the work, but the bi-directional intercultural experience. But even beyond that, what do you want to grasp in totality? So for example, I did extensive research before I went to Jordan, and I knew that I would be staying at the ACOR, which is the American Center for Research, and it's the American Institute for Research in Jordan. All of the Fulbrighters across the entire country stayed there. So we had breakfast together. You know, there were Fulbright specialists, Fulbright scholars. We had lunch together. We had dinner together. Many partnerships came out of those conversations to extend research. There were people that were conducting research that needed participants. So we were able to be their participants. So those are the types of things that you think about too. There might be projects that you're working on concurrent with your Fulbright experience. So do the research to see if the resources will be there for you so that you don't have to put anything else on hold.
Thank you, Walter. Doug, did you want to add to that, please?
Yeah, and a couple of things. Walter stole part of my thunder about the letters of rec, because I also did one for somebody and they got accepted. But one thing to be ready for is, say you go through the process, you're accepted, and you show up, be flexible. And I saw this with several of the Fulbright students that came to Lithuania. The Lithuania education system is a bit of a mix of former Soviet area with now the European higher education area, and it's very different than the US. It goes through accelerated blocks, and some of the students really struggle with that who are used to the North American semester-based system. So if you're at Walden, of course, you're used to a block-based approach, so not a problem, but do be flexible. Things don't necessarily go the way you planned. If you're planning to go as a specialist or trying to go as a scholar, also be flexible. When I got to Mongolia, the scope of the project changed about 3 or 4 times in 2 weeks. And we finally had to bring it back to, what did you have me here for? It was online learning. It wasn't building your assessment system. And we gently brought them back, but that's certainly that scope issue and changing circumstances are big issues.
Thanks, Doug, and all the best with your next application. Ashgar, did you want to add to what?
Yes. One of the things that I found out very useful is that once you are selected, if you do some study on the target country and especially target institution that you are going to work with, and get to know really their system, the nuances of their culture, and how you relate to them. This is very, very important, because sometimes we think that, okay, we are going there in order to provide them with some techniques or learn some techniques from them, but it's really beyond that. So it is worth it, especially in the beginning, depending on the duration of your assignment, that you spend days and weeks to do the study, understand where you stand, and how you can relate to the people. This is part of the cultural competency, but in a very specific way, because regardless of our, let's say, international experience, every situation really is different, and particularly in the areas that deals with the politics, public policy, etc., as you know. So this is really important to be ready. Otherwise, I mean, we may look like a misfit in both sides. I mean, getting information or giving information, or gaining knowledge or giving knowledge.
Hey, Nadia, could I just add one more point there?
Absolutely.
Have fun. Have fun. You know, when I went to Jordan, I was baptized in the Jordan River on the East Bank. I went to Petra and hung out to see the Sikh and ride the camels. So have fun. Don't just make it all work and no play. You have to play. Work hard and play hard.
Nice. Well said. So the next question, many of you reiterated the embassy. So I'm just going to go to the chat for a minute, because a couple of people.
Nadia, excuse me for interruption. I
Yep.
have a dissertation committee coming up. If you excuse me, I have to get ready for the
Oh,
next
no
10
worries.
minutes for
Thank you for
So,
taking the time. And
Thank you so much. Bye all. Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care. So Orletta had shared in the chat that she's a semifinalist in the semifinal round. One factor was contacting the awardee from the previous year. He was the one who got her the contact from the university for the letter of invitation. Orletta, did you want to share anything else around your, yep.
Yeah, well, sure. First, I wanted to say, Dr. McCullum, because I met you at a writing intensive. You mentioned you were at Fulbright. That's what sparked the inspiration. So I
Oh,
want to
good.
thank you. Yeah,
Sure.
really. It really was. So I'm a semifinalist for the Bahamas. The COVID is delaying a lot of us that final round decision. But I wanted to do the Bahamas. I happened to go there like everybody else on a cruise, but Nassau reminded me of Detroit, where I live right now. So I'm doing a comparison analysis of helping women start micro-enterprise businesses, because Nassau and Detroit want to diversify their workforce. And that's what I do, a lot of workforce development work. So that's what I wrote it on, but I didn't know who to contact. So I did the office hours, like Fulbright said, and she said, talk to the alumni. So I got over myself, contacted the alumni. He talked to me for about an hour and a half, gave me everybody I needed to contact. I did exactly what he said. I wrote out the application, and this is my first time, and I got to the semifinal round. So I'm going to see what happens.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
If you have questions right now, please feel free to put in the chat. Thank you, Crystal, for sharing with Zoe the link for the programming. She had asked for some specifically in the Middle East. Moving on to our next question as we round the hour. I think we have about 9 minutes left. Going to the interview process, are there any recommendations around how to approach that, what to do? I know Walter had already shared about practicing. Doug echoed the same sentiment, but anything else that you think would be beneficial for others to consider? We'll start with Jean, move back around to Doug, Walter, and Crystal.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments. I made a comment in my first set of comments about making sure you understand what your institution, regardless of what it is interested in, and why they're interested in participating in the Fulbright program, so that you can give that some specific thought, not only in your application, but then following it up and trying to, if you've been around for more than 10 or 15 years of professional experience, you try and synthesize your experience to really match what it is that they're interested in and engage with them in a conversation then in terms of, you know, what you can bring and how that fits into what they're looking for. And I think that certainly served me well, but like everyone has been saying, it's for the due diligence to make sure you understand what they really are interested in. And by the time you get to the interview, hopefully you've refined that some. And then I think take a look at everything you have to offer and focus on those parts that are most relevant, so that you know, some of the things that you're just thrilled about that you've accomplished in your career might not be particularly relevant to them. So focus on those things that you think will identify what a good match this is.
Thank you, Jean. Those are great suggestions. Doug?
Well, I would say in the interview process, there's this element of instability in a lot of the embassies right now. And I'll give you an example from Lithuania. The ambassador had just left in a rather public way with a disagreement of the then president. And the embassy was in a bit of a state of a shambles. And so what we had going on during that interview process was people being placed into the interview who really didn't know what was going on. They hadn't contacted the university. So there were some translation issues. Mongolia was different. In Mongolia, we had a very experienced ambassador who's a career diplomat, and she's now heads these programs in DC at the Department of State. So she is the person in charge of Fulbright and all the other exchange programs. But what I got out of that were questions that were about culture. So you just, and I was there to do something about an online program. So you just have to be flexible, try to understand, you know, where the questions are coming from, how things are getting deflected within this kind of triaging to try and get people out, and you'll come through it. So that's just be flexible.
Thanks, Doug. Walter?
Yeah, I was just going to add, and I think most of it's been shared already, is when we look at the experience that we have as professionals, as scholars, academics, you have to really be confident and competent that you have what it takes to become a Fulbright scholar. So when you think about self-efficacy and what you need to do to build that confidence, it's really about doing the research, doing the homework, engaging in the culture prior to getting there, and looking for those opportunities that might not even be a part of your Fulbright requirements. And the reason I say that's important because generally when you build a relationship with the institution or the agency that you're going to be working with, there will always be opportunities for follow-on work. And if you have already identified the follow-on work and start talking about it in your application package in terms of knowing the historical context about the social ills or the problems in the country in which you're going to be engaging, that's a plus for you. And also you're forecasting follow-on work through partnership, whether it's through your own professional organization or the Fulbright Association or whatever type of Fulbright you're applying for.
Thank you, Walter. Crystal, did you have anything to add around where you're at in the process?
Yeah, so I just wanted to, first, I wanted to give a piece of advice to address the question that Zoe put in the chat. So, and this is based on one of my friends who applied for a scholar program that required a language proficiency. And, you know, the tip is to be honest, because you will be tested on that in the interview. And she didn't pass the fluency during the interview process. So that's a learn. So be honest about your skill set. And there are programs that, although if they use the word required, then that means they're going to want you. But sometimes they'll say the word preferred. That means that you don't have to have the competency. And if you, let's say you speak like broken Spanish, or maybe you understand it, but you're not fluent, meaning you can't read and write in it. Make sure you're just honest about your skill set, because they will test you on that. Regarding me and my process, I have not experienced an interview yet, but I'm hoping that I will get a chance to do that as, you know, things progress with the with my scholar, my specialist application.
Thanks, Crystal. Jean, you had something to share?
Yeah, just about honesty in terms of fluency with foreign languages. I originally didn't even consider applying for the research chair at the University of Quebec because I don't speak French. And so one of my very first questions, and I just declared fundamentally, I'm not being modest. I don't speak French. I had 4 years of Latin in high school and 2 of German in college. And I'm, sort of representative of the ugly American. I have gazillion degrees and certifications, but I am not fluent in a foreign language, unless you count Latin. So, I can't emphasize that enough. And, I even put it in solid caps in my application. It just isn't worth it to try and slough that. And as a result, people could see at the University of Quebec, I was trying my darndest, wrong time, wrong age to be learning a new language, but I was trying. And they were so helpful. And of course, Ottawa, as those of you who are familiar with Canada know, is truly bilingual. And it turns out that, what the University of Quebec was interested in is reaching out in a bilingual way. And so I had some issues with my French keyboard in my office and things like that, but I just had a lot of help. And I can't emphasize enough, just be upfront. Don't try and pretend that you're fluent when you're not. Goodness knows, I wish I were fluent. And oftentimes you'll see preferred. So just check it out, because maybe, I originally didn't even consider that to apply until I thought, well, let me check it out a little bit further. And I was encouraged to apply. So I did, and it worked out great. So excellent suggestion. Thanks so much for making that, Crystal. Yeah, it's best to be straightforward and upfront.
Thank you, everyone, for your honesty and your answers. I'm going to open it up to the audience. We have been doing a rolling chat question session, but is there anyone who'd like to unmute their mic and ask a question specifically to the panel members? So in the chat, there is a question here I'll read out first. Is it a must an applicant will have agency or school he or she is going to work with? Can an applicant work with the head of a community of the government or of the governor or state in case if the international needs of the community were there?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. I think, yes, but I think the opportunities will be more readily available in that vein and under the Fulbright Specialist Program. Because again, those programs really span across local, state, and federal government, as well as different agencies in different countries. So I think that would be the best alignment.
And I do know in the case of Germany, there are some specific programs which are not called Fulbright, but they are administered by the same office of the Department of State. So you have to kind of dig through the Fulbright websites, because there's about 3 of them, and find those country-specific awards.
Thank you. Other questions? Oh, here's one. Are the Fulbright opportunities here in the US and territories? Lauren's asking.
From my experience, yes. When you say US territories, I would say yes, because, and I think one of our panelists just did one or will be doing one in, was it the Bahamas or someplace?
Yeah.
Yes. So the Caribbean and US territories, I do know of several persons who actually had a Fulbright assignment in the Virgin Islands.
Oh, nice. Thanks, Lauren, for that question. Any other questions? So we've rounded the hour. Thank you all so much for taking the time to give your advice, share your experiences, and give some tidbits that were honest and to the point. I think everyone here really appreciates it. If you are open to conversations with applicants, please put your email or contact information in the chat, and we'll give a moment for that. And then feel free to copy that out. When I share the link via the Fulbright email, I'll put them in as well. So I'll save the chat for this. Thank you, Doug, Crystal, Walter, Jean. Any other closing thoughts or comments before we end the session?
Yeah, I just want to make a few remarks. Nadia, thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing to carry on this magnificent project. And Dr. Francis, Crystal, started out as the inaugural president. Tom and the board members, my colleagues. I mean, this is just absolutely amazing just to see how far this has come, and just the dedication and the commitment that's just sustaining over time. It really makes me feel good to know that we are very committed and we will not. In fact, I think Jean was the person that said this when we were starting. We're really going to be committed and we're going to see this through the end. We were really struggling, trying to figure out how we were going to develop a program, what type of program, and then we came up with the Fulbright Readiness program. So I commend all of you, my colleagues, for just hanging in there and supporting it. I know Walden is very proud of the work that we're doing, and just the participants and those who are eager to become Fulbrighters. Hang in there. If you're not successful in being selected the first time, don't give up. It's just like publishing. I mean, sometimes your manuscript never gets published the first or second time. Keep trying, keep trying. But anything that we can do to help, we are here to support you in any way. And congratulations on what you've done so far just to get you to this point.
Dr. Nadia, I have just a comment, if you will.
Absolutely, RJ. Go ahead. Thank you, Walter.
I'm Dr. Johnson, Dr. Arla Wayne Johnson. I'm the Director of Compliance for the Walden University chapter for Fulbright. Now, I've never done a Fulbright tour, but I did do a tour in my senior year of college at the School of International Training. And the School of International Training sent me to Italy and also to Amsterdam, Holland. And the reason why I went to these places, or was selected to go to these places, was to do an international study on the significance of Montessori education. Now, when I went to Italy, I stayed with a family, an Italian family in Semprignano, Italy. That's right outside of Rome. And the whole village spoke nothing but Italian. And my saving grace was that I had studied Spanish in high school and also in college, and at the School of International Training in Brattleboro, Vermont. They had given us 3 months of language and culture in Italian. And so I spent 6 months over there, and I'm telling you, I really, really enjoyed the program, the program and the experience. I grew up on a cotton farm down in Mississippi. We were plantation sharecroppers. We had nothing. And so without and I had gone nowhere. So without the opportunity of that experience afforded me, I don't think at that point I would have been open to the various cultures of the world, the various languages of the world, and it was just fantastic. Fast forward from that period, I joined the military. I'm a 35-year veteran, combat wounded. I was first responder in the 1991 missile that killed 28 Americans. I was there. The good thing about it, however, that I was able to leverage the cultural training that I learned in Italy, and I was also able to leverage the language training that I learned in Italy to be able to associate with the individuals in Saudi Arabia and in Iraq. I understood the significance of what we were doing, and I understood and did research in the culture, just like I did the research on the culture and the significance in Italian. And so I used those same skill sets. I did a paper, again, that was entitled The Significance of Montessori Teaching. And it was really, really held to high esteem by my professors at Aurora University, which was the university that sent me to Italy on that international study. And the reason why I wanted to speak to this is just to draw a bright blue line noting the significance of a program such as the Fulbright program. And I wish you all luck. For those individuals that have done it, I really can relate to those individuals. And I'm telling you, it's a life changer. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, RJ. That's very thoughtful. And we appreciate you taking the time to share that. I do have one question in the chat. There's an individual who has experience in public health, and they'd like to know if they can apply with a bachelor degree, which they can. It's just not the scholar, nor is it the professional per se, depending on the professional background. But they would like someone who has a public health background to support them or be a mentor. Do any of you have that background or know someone that we can recommend?
I don't right off. I will certainly, look through the network to see if there's someone, and my email address is in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Walter.
And,
I think
yeah,
she's
I will reach out to my daughter. She's a first-year med student, but she has a background in public health in Haiti, which Walter knows very well. So, yeah.
Oh, wow. So Shanta, Sheila, please reach out to Walter and Doug, and they can help you navigate your question and area. So thank you everyone so much for taking the time this evening, and we appreciate all of your feedback, narratives, stories, and recommendations. Have a great evening, everyone. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
Be well, everyone. Stay safe.
Together. Bye now.
Bye-bye.